what do you think is the difference between someone that goes on this constant sort of learning journey from an earlier age and someone that kind of goes through a more passive experience of life, whether it be in their career, stuff like that?
I would bring it to one word: curiosity. Somewhere to the right of my head is a book called Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson. And Leonardo da Vinci is the most, even though he's a questionable character for how he treated his his apprentices and other young boy understudies, which is a bit of a question mark. Putting that aside, if we can, the most diverse genius of all time that we know of, who he didn't even share or publish that much, but it was all found in his notebooks. And the man was a beast at curiosity. He wanted to know how to paint people properly and things properly. And he wasn't satisfied with the way people painted prior. He thought there's not fixed lines to things. The lines between things are blurred. So he invented this painting technique called sfumato, which actually blurred the lines between things, because he thought reality is not so black and white. It doesn't have these clear edges. Everything is interconnected. And so in trying to understand more about how to paint, he studied human anatomy. So he would measure up to 80 plus ratios on the human body. He'd get people to stand there and he'd measure things, and he'd figure out the distance between your nose and your chest was the same distance between your shoulders, and all these things and all these ratios he discovered in the body. So then he got to learn a lot about anatomy. And that led him to actually make all these medical discoveries and breakthroughs up to 4 centuries ahead of time. And then you've got how he wanted to understand how light hit the body so he could paint it correctly. So he actually became very proficient in studying light optics. And he just went through all these rabbit holes that made him diversely curious about everything. So Leonardo da Vinci is the opposite of the passive person. He was relentlessly curious, and he served his curiosity ahead of any other variable. He believed the real wealth in life was wisdom and not money. And he wasn't actually rich really at any stage. He often struggled for money, to be honest. And then, Walter Isaacson also wrote a phenomenal book about Einstein. And Einstein, again, was just this curious child. I think at the age of 6, he wanted to know how a compass worked. And a very wise man, a mentor and friend, who we call Gilly in Constant Student, once pointed out to me that the root word of the etymology, he's big on etymology, and the root word of curious is care. People who just care. Whereas the people who are more passive, they're not necessarily as curious about things. They don't really bother to know, what the ratios are on the human body, or these intricate details. And so you can keep going back, why, and there's probably some very complex things with people's development that make them curious or not curious. It would go very, very deep. I don't know if it's anything we can program or anything like that, but I have a saying that one of the many lines I love is, the one who is most interested is the one who wins. Because the person who's just interested is pursuing things from this pure intrinsic motivation standpoint. They don't need to be reinforced. They're not looking for praise. They're not looking for money. They're just intellectually fascinated with things. And they always, and those people go a very, very long way. If you're competing with someone who is more interested in you, all other things being equal, you will struggle to compete in the traditional sense of the word. And interest can't be faked, but it can be discovered. And this is probably the whole Dorman concept again. How do you get people more interested? You can't force them. You can't force someone to be interested in something. But the trick is what Naval says, about how do you get people to read? First, you must read what you love until you love reading. This is what we've got. Again, this is one of those things we are doing the 180 on in education. We're doing it the exactly wrong way. We're forcing people to do things. And then every now and then you'll get someone like me who will discover, I like this English stuff. But mainly because I got a couple of prizes early on and it became part of my identity. That's why I started to like English, to be honest. And that can work. But the other thing is that, it's tricky, because you got to, the Da Vinci example is things lead to things. Being interested in one thing maybe painting, can lead someone to be interested in anatomy, because things are connected. And so you have to first meet people where they're at, which is what are they interested in currently. And so you could use the example, if I may, of say my brother, who's the ultimate kind of passive person, my first brother, and how I've tried to trick him in a way is that, you know, what is he interested in? He's fascinated by the world of gaming. He's fascinated by anime and things like that. And I try to trick him and go, you spend all this time, you know, playing these games or watching anime. What if you made a YouTube channel about it? You know, you could record the same amount of time you put into it, wouldn't change much, and then you're doing YouTube. But then by getting someone interested in that, then they start getting interested in YouTube, because they might start to think, how do I do this? How do I make the most of it? And then from there, you might encounter a door, something you're interested in. I would say, Luke, you yourself are one of the best examples of that in your quote unquote career so far, which has gone from, you know, studying IT through to, you know, kind of very like entry level kind of consumer sales, and then going into telcos, which was not linear. And you might recount that as a bit of an example.